What's up, guys? Sci-Fi Guy 2094 here. Today I'm going to be talking about The Nun from the Conjuring franchise. So, this movie is quite an addition to the Conjuring franchise, if I do say so myself, and I'm going to explain why I really like this one. Now, it takes place in the 1950s in Romania, and there's like a giant castle. So, already you have great scenery with the castle, and obviously with the history of like vampires and Romania and Transylvania and Eastern Europe, all that mythology. It just makes for a great it makes for a great setting. They're in the countryside and there are no vampires in this movie, but just knowing kind of like where these folklore started as far as vampire folklores in this area, I thought it was interesting. There's great scenery and it looks really spooky in the castle. But anyway, um, the main thing about this movie is there is a father from the Vatican, and he is sent to investigate a suicide that has happened at this. It's basically a monastery where all these nuns pray constantly. They explain later why they're always praying, but it's him, and there's a nun in training, and then there's like a Frenchman who has moved to Romania to he's like a farmer and he's kind of helping the people there. But they go to this castle because the Frenchman, he says that he found this body hanging, and they're trying to investigate it as like, okay, well, is it a suicide or did something else happen? And basically what happens is once they get to the castle, they start seeing strange apparitions. The father, for example, is haunted by this little boy who he performed like an exorcism for years earlier, but unfortunately, the boy did not survive his injuries from the exorcism, so he later died. So he's seeing like the apparition of this boy, unfortunately, he couldn't save. And then there's seemingly like this evil nun who's walking around who's not one of the actual nuns. They keep seeing this figure. And so there's a lot of scenes where they're just like, okay, what the hell is going on? Like, what is this thing that's walking around? And there's a really great scene where the father is again, he's haunted by that little boy, the little ghost. And I'm just like, dude, do not get out and go into the darkness. Do not follow this little boy that you're seeing, because it's not really him. But he gets up, he goes out, and he follows the boy. And I don't know why he followed the boy, but he did. And basically he ends up falling down in a grave and he's basically buried alive. And the sister, the not the sister, because she's not like a sister, she's like a nun in training. She basically has to get him out, and because of not necessarily superstition, but because of some fears that if you were buried, and if you were still alive, you could ring this little bell and somebody could hear you. So basically, all these graves have like a little bell down, a little string attached to a bell. So luckily, he's able to ring that bell, and the nun is able to find him. Well, the nun in training, so to speak. So again, you have like a lot of weird apparitions that are haunting the place, and it's just really a creepy vibe. You have like the cemetery, there's lots of fog, it's this big giant castle. So honestly, the scenery's great. It's definitely a very creepy environment, and that makes for some really good scares in this movie. So the main plot of this movie as to why this this creature is trying to escape this castle, and they go into the backstory of this thing. But this castle was owned by like a Romanian duke, and he started dabbling in some very dark magic, and he wanted to summon this very evil creature. But the church found out about it and they basically stopped this demon from being summoned. And in order to kind of seal that portal, they had to use the actual blood of Jesus Christ. Like, yeah, the actual blood of Jesus. That's the artifact that's in the castle. And so now this evil is like, it's free in a sense, because during, I believe it was probably during World War II, I guess. So there was like some bombardments, like from jets and things like that, planes, and it kind of like broke this seal open so the evil was able to escape. And now, as long as it gets a soul, it can leave the castle. So what the priest and the nun in training and the Frenchman have to do is basically seal this portal back up using the blood of Jesus Christ himself. So this demonic creature cannot leave this castle and wreak havoc into the world. Now, this takes a different turn than a lot of the other Conjuring movies, because, like, while the other ones are just like ghost stories, haunted dolls, and things of that nature, this thing is like a complete demonic entity from hell, to where they had to seal the portal using Jesus's blood. And if this thing is released into the world, it can just like completely just ravage the world because it's so evil. And to me, that was something different than some of the other Conjuring movies, where they just focus more on like helping the common guy, the common family, and things of that nature with these supernatural phenomena. This one, I feel like, was a world-ending event if this thing were to get free in its full form. And we do see that this creature is able to put a mark on the Frenchman, and unfortunately, the Frenchman does become under the possession of this creature. And we see that because at the end, they show that I can't believe I'm forgetting their names, but the main characters from the franchise, Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson. It takes place in the 70s, and they're talking about how they had to like do an exorcism for this guy who had never spoken Latin, but is apparently speaking perfect Latin. So this is how this ties into the events of the first film, when they're showing these students in this lecture hall a video of like an exorcism. So yeah. Anyway, I thought The Nun was really good. A lot of good scares in this one, to be honest. And like I said, with like the setting, just like this big giant castle, and the fog, and the graveyards and the openness, like the countryside, it was like really creepy and just eerie and unsettling. So I really liked The Nun. It was quite a good addition to the Conjuring franchise. And honestly, anytime you see The Nun, it's pretty dang terrifying. So this thing is very, very scary. So something I hope I don't have nightmares of. But anyway, I really like The Nun. That's my review for it. I give it a 7 out of 10.